Today in Ivory Coast, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken pledged additional U.S. financing to help fight conflict and bring stability to coastal West Africa, where insecurity linked to Islamist extremism has increased in recent years. He spoke today after meeting with President Alassane Ouattara.
Particularly the leadership shown by Côte d'Ivoire in countering extremism and violence. We're announcing $45 billion in new funding through the U.S. strategy to prevent conflict and promote stability for coastal West African states. With this new investment, the United States will have invested nearly $300 million just over the past 2 years in stability-focused assistance in coastal West Africa. And we're also working to bolster Côte d'Ivoire's security capacity. There's been an increase in training multiplied 15 times, training equipment for the military just over the last year. We're expanding civilian forces investment as well.
Blinken is the second stop of his trip to Africa. He arrived in Ivory Coast's financial capital, Abidjan, on Monday evening. Today, he said President Joe Biden's administration is committed to building ties with African governments.
I'm here, as you know, as part of a 4-country tour that took us to Cabo Verde yesterday, here in Côte d'Ivoire, and then on to Nigeria and to Angola. And we're here for a very simple reason, because America and Africa's futures, their peoples, their prosperity are linked and joined as never before.
The top U.S. diplomat, a long-time soccer fan, also said he saw a bright football future for Ivory Coast, despite seeing the hosts of the Africa Cup of Nations suffer a crushing defeat. Blinken watched a critical match Monday night in Abidjan between the host and Equatorial Guinea, joining Ivory Coast politicians in a VIA box. But Ivory Coast went on to lose 4-0, leaving the team facing a group stage exit from the competition. Meeting today with President Ouattara, Blinken nonetheless was full of praise for the Elephants, saying he saw a young team with enormous talent. Kenya says it wants to promote peace in East Africa and has no problems with neighboring countries. At the same time, there are undeniable signs of diplomatic strains with at least 4 neighbors, including 2 that recently recalled the ambassadors from Nairobi. Mohamed Yusuf reports from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi.
Kenya's effort to assert itself as a regional political force and economic hub in Eastern Africa is not going over well with some of its neighbors. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Sudan recall their ambassadors after their governments accused Kenya of hosting and dealing with their country's opposition groups in Nairobi. Uganda, meanwhile, recently took Kenya to an East African court in Tanzania over an oil distribution dispute. The case is about Kenya not allowing Ugandan government oil marketers to operate within its borders. This comes after Uganda discontinued the previous open tender system for purchasing petroleum products from Kenya. Also, Tanzania banned Kenya Airways flights from Nairobi to Dar es Salaam last week because Kenya allegedly denied permission for Tanzania's national carrier to operate cargo flights to Nairobi. The ban was lifted after discussions between the foreign affairs ministers of the 2 countries. Kenyan Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi said Sunday that his country is not at war with its neighbors and wants to bring peace to the region.
Mataifa yanayumba yanapigana.
Mudavadi says some states are vulnerable, others are in conflict, and our President William Samoei Ruto is on the front line making sure peace returns in these countries. He says the wars in those countries will affect our country too. Kenya has come under criticism from some Africans and its own citizens on how the government is handling engagements with other states. International relations expert Kizito Sabala says the diplomatic sparks are growing out of countries trying to counter Kenya's influence.
There is always going to be a tug of war of what Kenya tries to do from the neighbors. From my point of view, I don't think there is really something very serious to worry about. These are things that will continue to come as Kenya tries to assert itself as a regional power, and the other countries will try to find any leverage to use it in order to bring that down.
Kenyan President Ruto, who came to power more than a year ago, has met several heads of state in Africa, including his neighbours, promising to help solve Africa's chronic problems of conflict and hunger and to bring economic development. Sabala says such assertiveness from a new leader will get pushback.
They are reacting the way they are reacting because I think in Nairobi we have a new president who is very assertive and who seem to be projecting this to the region. And therefore, I think that in itself seems to be telling them, no. Let's put a stop here. But I think with the time they'll just get used to the way our president is doing things. And that's fine. I don't think it's a big issue to worry about.
Experts urge Kenya to handle the conflict in Congo cautiously, especially regarding rebel groups that have contributed to the country's instability. They also want Kenya to refrain from taking sides in the Sudan conflict, which has pitted the country's armed forces and paramilitary rapid support forces against each other.
Kenya's Attorney General Justin Mutuli on Tuesday pleaded with the Supreme Court to hear his application seeking the top court's opinion on the legal consequences and effects of decisions of the East African Court of Justice on the country's sovereignty. Mr. Mutuli said whereas there is no express provision in the East African Community Treaty conferring upon the EACJ the jurisdiction to interpret the constitutions of pattern states, the regional court has in several decisions interpreted its jurisdiction to include the review of decisions issued by apex courts of member countries. According to Mr. Muturi, the decisions of the EACJ end up conflicting with judgments issued by the Supreme Court. The AG, through lawyer Mahati Somane, cited a decision of the regional court awarding politician Martha Karua Kenyan shillings 2.7 million, $16,000 at current exchange rate, in damages for infringement of her right to a fair trial in 2019. Mrs. Karua filed the case in the regional court after the Supreme Court dismissed her 2017 petition challenging the election of Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waigulu. It is thus our position that the application seeks to unravel a legal uncertainty in a manner that promotes the rule of law and public interest, Mr. Somane submitted. Apart from Kirinyaga, gubernatorial election petition, Mrs. Karua joined a case filed at EACJ by Male Mabilizi following the dismissal of the August 2022 presidential election petition arising filed by Azimio la Umoja. The Supreme Court ruled that the 2022 general election was conducted in accordance with legal requirements of the Constitution and the Elections Act. Mr. Somane told the bench led by Chief Justice Martha Koome that the advisory opinion seeks to determine whether the decisions of the Supreme Court may be subjected to a review at the EACJ and what would be the legal consequences. The court also needs to determine the legal effect of a finding by the EACJ that a nation court, including the Supreme Court, did not adhere to legal principles including natural justice and the rule of law. In a case heard and determined by the National Court, said the AG in his application. The Attorney General said he was apprehensive that the exercise of appellate jurisdiction by the regional court over decisions by national courts may pose serious conflict to Kenya's commitment to the rule of law because of adhering holdings by national courts on one hand and the EACJ on the other hand.